The relentless Montana sun beat down on the vast plains, a shimmering ocean of golden grass stretching from the jagged peaks in the west to the gentle slopes where the Ironwood Manor stood defiant against the sky. Dust motes danced in the air as Kalen Sterling's drovers pushed cattle, their lowing calls echoing across the wide expanse. Inside the grand house, far from the sun-drenched fields and the powerful men who tamed them, 19-year-old Alara Thorne knelt on the gleaming mahogany floor of the great hall. Her hands were raw, her back ached as if it might snap. The once vibrant emerald of her calico gown had faded to a drab gray, clinging to damp shoulders as sweat traced a cold path down her spine. A loose coil of hair fell across her face, but Alara didn't bother to brush it away. Scullery maids were invisible. No one noticed them. No one cared how they looked. 6 months of labor, since the collapse of her family, had etched that lesson deep within her soul. The heavy wash basin beside her knee felt like her only companion in a world that had turned to ice. She polished silver until her tired reflection stared back, scrubbed floors until the wood gleamed like polished amber in the afternoon light. The work was brutal, but not the worst of it. The worst was knowing that somewhere in Silver Creek Gulch, Silas McCready, a man of 30 years, was laughing. Laughing with his new fiancée, Maeve Sterling, age 28. He had once promised Alara a future, whispered of spring flowers, quiet evenings by a crackling fire, perhaps even a journey to New Orleans. He had held her hands, swearing she would never be alone. That was before the dry spell, before the herds perished, before her parents were laid beneath the unforgiving Montana soil. When her family lost everything, Silas had retreated, slowly at first, then vanished completely. Now, she was a forgotten maid, and he was set to marry into wealth. The heavy oak doors of the great hall creaked open behind her. Clara Bell, 29, stood in the frame, her freckled face alight with a spark Alara hadn't seen in herself for a long time. Hope. Clara's russet hair was pulled back in a loose braid, her eyes twinkling. "There you are, Alara," she said, stepping inside. "I've been looking everywhere." "I'm working," Alara replied, gesturing to the half-cleaned floor. "You're always working," Clara chided softly. "Tonight you stop. There's a harvest festival ball at the manor. You're coming with me." Alara's stomach tightened. "I don't have anything to wear." Clara smiled, holding out a folded charcoal gray dress. "I brought you something. It's clean. It fits. Come on." Alara hesitated. It felt safer to stay invisible, safer to remain on her knees with a brush in her hand. But there was something in Clara's eyes, not pity, not sympathy. It was a stubborn belief that life could still surprise you if you dared to stand up. 2 hours later, Alara stood in the cramped attic garret she shared with 3 other maids, facing a cracked mirror that hung crookedly. The simple charcoal dress Clara had brought was mended in places, but it fit her perfectly. Her hair was pinned up, though a few rebellious strands escaped around her face. She barely recognized the woman staring back. "You look beautiful," Clara said softly from the doorway. Alara's chest tightened. She wasn't used to hearing those words. Together, they descended the back stairs, through narrow corridors, toward the bright glow of the great hall. Fiddle and banjo music drifted toward them, mingling with laughter and conversation. The scent of venison stew and cornbread filled the air. Oil lamps burned warmly in every corner, casting golden light across the polished floors. For a moment, Alara forgot who she was. Then she saw him. Silas McCready stood near the center of the room, impeccably dressed in a dark wool coat and vest, smiling easily as guests surrounded him. Maeve Sterling, her velvet dress shimmering under the lamp glow, clung to his arm. But Silas's eyes found Alara's. Slow, cold, deliberate. He stepped toward her, leaving Maeve behind. Well, he said smoothly. "Alara Thorne, I heard you were working here, but I didn't believe it." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "You should be grateful," he continued quietly. "The Sterlings are generous to keep you. After all, who is lining up to marry a woman with nothing?" Her chest tightened. Heat rushed her face. She had survived hunger. She had survived loss. She had survived, standing over fresh graves with no one to hold her hand. And now this man dared to look at her like she was dust beneath his boots. Her eyes searched the room, and that was when she saw him. Kalen Sterling, 38, stood at the far edge of the hall, leaning against a massive stone hearth, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair falling slightly over his brow. His presence alone seemed to quiet the space around him. Men respected him. Horses obeyed him. Deals bent in his favor. His gaze rested on her, unreadable but steady. Something inside Illyra shifted. Before she could think, her feet moved. She crossed the hall, ignoring the startled looks of the guests. The music seemed distant. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She stopped in front of Kalen. Without giving herself time to doubt, she grabbed the front of his coat, rose onto her toes, and kissed him. Hard, raw, certain. For a heartbeat, he did not move. Then his hands came to her waist, strong and sure, holding her steady. The world tilted. The music faded. The whispers blurred. It was only him and the heat between them. She pulled back just enough to breathe and turned toward Silas. "He's my betrothed," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent room. The great hall froze. Then the whispers began, like wind rustling across tall prairie grass. Kalen's hand remained firm at her back. "We need to talk," he murmured near her ear. Her heart pounded so fiercely she thought it might break free from her chest. The cool night air greeted them as they stepped onto the grand porch. The sounds of the ball faded behind thick wooden doors. Beyond the manor, cattle lowed softly in the distance, and the Clearwater River murmured under the stars. Illyra gripped the railing, her knuckles white. Kalen stepped closer, oil lamp glow casting shadows across his face. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked quietly. "I wanted him to see," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted him to know I'm not invisible." "You've done more than that," Kalen replied. "You tied yourself to me in front of everyone. That kiss changes things. People will expect a wedding. They will expect loyalty." She swallowed. "I didn't think." "No," he said calmly. "You didn't." She lifted her chin despite the fear creeping into her chest. "If I don't want the consequences," a faint edge of amusement touched his voice, "you won't have much choice. You claimed me, and I will not be made a fool in my own house." Her knees felt weak, but she refused to show it. "I did it for revenge," she said firmly. "Only for that." Kalen studied her carefully. "You believe that?" he asked. His eyes darkened slightly. "The moment you kissed me, it stopped being about revenge. What you wanted was to feel what it was like to be seen, to belong." Her breath caught. He was not wrong. "It felt powerful," she admitted softly. "Good," he said, "because you're going to need that power." She looked at him, unsure. "If the world believes you are mine," he said steadily, "then you must learn to stand like it, speak like it, walk into rooms without lowering your eyes." "I don't know how," she whispered. "I'll teach you." The wind moved gently through the prairie grass beyond the porch. The night felt heavy with something new and dangerous. What had started as a desperate act to wound the man who betrayed her had become something far larger. Standing under the wide Montana sky, Illyra Thorne realized that her life had just changed, and there was no turning back. The next morning, the manor did not feel the same. Illyra woke before dawn, her heart pounding as if the kiss had just happened. The attic garret felt tighter than usual, the thin walls pressing in around her. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream. The hall, the silence, Kalen's hand firm at her back. Then she heard the whispers. They traveled through the corridors like smoke. Asterisk, she claimed him in front of everyone. Asterisk, Kalen Sterling does not forgive foolish games. Asterisk Illyra sat up slowly, her stomach twisted. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a strange spark. She had stood in the center of that hall and refused to be small. That mattered. By breakfast, the entire estate knew. Drovers glanced at her with curiosity. The kitchen staff stared openly. Even the stable hands paused when she passed. She kept her back straight, just like he said. Late that morning, a knock came at the small door. Not the soft knock of a maid, not the hurried tap of a servant. It was steady, certain. Kalen stood outside, 38, wearing a dark coat, dust from the yard still clinging to his boots. His expression gave nothing away. "Walk with me," he said, not a question. She followed him out into the bright Montana sun. The plains stretched wide and golden, wind rolling across them in waves. Cattle moved in the distance. The world felt open, endless. He stopped near the fence line and turned to face her. "You understand that men will test you now," he said. "They will watch for weakness." "I'm not weak," she answered quickly. "I know," he said calmly. "But you don't." The words struck deeper than she expected. He began with something simple. "Walk toward me." She frowned but obeyed, crossing the short stretch of dirt between them. "Stop," he said. "You're shrinking. Your shoulders curve inward. Your eyes drop." She stiffened. She tried once more, lifting her chin, forcing her shoulders back. "Better," he murmured, "but you are still asking permission." She felt frustration rise. "I'm not used to being looked at," she said. "You will be," he replied, "because you chose it." The days that followed became lessons. In the library, he placed account books in front of her. He explained cattle prices, land rights, and supply routes. His voice was steady, patient, never mocking. "You must understand what you stand beside," he told her. "If they believe you are my future wife, you must know this ranch as well as I do." Her head ached from numbers and long discussions, but she did not quit. In the empty great hall, he taught her to dance. No crowd, no music at first, just the echo of their footsteps against polished wood. "Follow my lead," he said, placing a firm hand at her waist. She stepped on his boot. He did not react. Again, she tried, her body tense. "You're fighting me," he said quietly. "Trust the movement." "I don't trust easily," she replied. I noticed there was no insult in his voice, only truth. Slowly, her body began to respond. Their steps aligned. The distance between them felt charged, alive. When music finally filled the room one evening, her heart raced for reasons she did not understand. It was not fear. It was not revenge. It was something warmer. Then came horses. The first time she stepped into the stable, her breath caught. The scent of hay and leather filled her lungs. Memories of her father teaching her to ride came rushing back before everything fell apart. Kalen handed her the reins of a sturdy dun mare, Daisy. "You remember," he said simply. She nodded, though doubt tightened her stomach. Mounting felt strange at first. Her muscles were stiff, her confidence thin. "Sit tall," he called from beside his own horse. "You are not a burden. You are part of the ride." They moved across the plains together, wind whipping through her pinned hair. The land stretched endless and wild. For the first time in months, she felt free, as if the weight of scrubbing floors and whispered insults had lifted from her shoulders. But peace never lasted long in Montana. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The yellowed parchment was rough, the scrawled script uneven. Alara unfolded it with trembling fingers. Asterisk, your mother was a traitor. Asterisk, the words blurred as her vision filled with tears. The letter claimed her mother had forged documents, that she had helped a rival outfit during the dry spell, that her family's ruin was not simple bad luck. It was betrayal. Her chest tightened so hard she could barely breathe. That evening at dinner, she forced herself to speak. "Did you know my mother?" she asked Alastair Sterling, Kalen's 70-year-old father. The old man paused, his fork hovering above his plate. "I knew of her," he admitted slowly. "She made poor choices, helped the wrong men, but your father never knew." The room felt like it tilted. "So our ruin was her fault?" Alara whispered. Alastair sighed. "I did not destroy your family. Circumstances did. But yes, her actions played a part." The word struck like a blow. She pushed back her chair and fled the room, tears blurring her path. She did not stop until she reached the library. The letter shook in her hands. Her mother had braided her hair, sung to her, held her during storms. How could both versions be true? Kalen entered quietly. He did not speak at first. He simply knelt before her. "Talk to me," he said gently. "I'm the daughter of a criminal," she whispered. "You are the woman who crossed a hall and claimed me," he replied firmly. "You are not your mother's mistakes." Tears slid down her cheeks. "What if I carry her weakness?" she asked. "You carry her strength," he said. "You survived. You stood up. That is not weakness. He pulled her into his arms. She let herself break, and in his steady embrace, something shifted inside her again. Revenge had brought her to him, but this felt different, real. A few days later, danger came without warning. Alara had ridden out to visit her aunt in a remote cabin by the Clearwater River. The afternoon sun was high when 3 riders appeared on the road behind her. At first, she thought nothing of it. Then they surrounded her. "Easy now," one of them said with a crooked grin. Her heart pounded. She tightened her grip on Daisy's reins. "We just want a word," another added. Fear surged through her veins. She kicked her horse forward, but one of the men grabbed the bridle. Daisy reared slightly. Before Alara could scream, a gunshot cracked through the air. The men froze. Kalen rode toward them, a repeater carbine steady in his hands. Several drovers flanked him. His expression was cold, deadly. The men released her and fled without another word. Kalen dismounted quickly and reached her side. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. She shook her head, though her hands trembled violently. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat pounding against her cheek. "They were sent to scare you," he said quietly. "Or worse." Her mind flashed to Silas, to rival outfits, to whispers of scandal. "I won't let anyone touch you," Kalen said, his voice low and fierce. For the first time, she did not pull away from his protection. She leaned into it. The weeks that followed sealed something between them. Alara moved fully into the main house. No more shared maid quarters. No more hiding in shadows. She sat beside him during meetings, spoke when asked, sometimes even before she was asked. Men who once dismissed her now listened. She learned to negotiate, to calculate risk, to make decisions that shaped the ranch. And each time she walked into a room, she felt stronger. Silas McCready watched from a distance at the next annual harvest fair in Fort Benton, his jaw tight, his pride wounded. But Alara did not look away this time. She stood beside Kalen, not as a servant, not as a desperate girl, but as a woman chosen. And somewhere between the dance lessons, the long rides across the plains, and the quiet nights spent talking under oil lamp glow, her anger towards Silas faded. In its place grew something steady, something deep. The memory of that first kiss no longer felt reckless. It felt like the beginning of a fire she had not known she needed. And as autumn settled over Montana, painting the hills in golden rust, Alara understood one truth clearly. She had stepped into that great hall for revenge. But she was no longer fighting the past. She was building a future, and she was no longer walking alone. Winter came early that year. Frost covered the plains like a thin white blanket, and the wind carried a sharp bite that slipped through coats and settled deep in the bones. The Ironwood Manor stood strong against it, smoke rising from its chimneys, warm light glowing through its tall windows. Inside, Alara stood at the large window of the main hall, her hand resting gently on her stomach. Her world had changed so quickly that sometimes she had to stand still just to believe it. Kalen entered quietly behind her. He did not speak at first. He simply placed his hands over hers, strong and warm against the cold glass. "You're thinking again," he said softly. "I am," she admitted. She turned slightly, and there was something different in her eyes now. Not fear, not doubt. Peace. "I never thought I would stand here," she said. "Not like this." "You were always meant to," Kalen replied. She smiled faintly. "6 months ago, I was scrubbing floors. And now you own them," he said without hesitation. Her hand pressed more firmly against her stomach. "I wanted revenge," she whispered. "I wanted Silas to hurt the way I hurt. And now I don't care what he feels." That was the truth. Silas McCready had faded into something small, a distant shadow in a life that had grown too bright for him to matter. What filled her heart now was stronger than anger. It was love. Weeks later, under a pale winter sunrise, Kalen found her in the garden behind the manor. The ground was hard, but the ancient juniper tree still stood tall at the edge of the plains. He walked toward her with something in his hand, a simple silver band etched with a western star. "Marry me," he said. "Not for show, not for reputation. For us. Because I love you, and because I want every sunrise beside you." Her throat tightened. This was no longer about lessons or appearances, no longer about whispers in a hall. This was choice. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes. 2 weeks later, they stood beneath the tall juniper tree, the plains stretching endless behind them. A small group gathered close. Her aunt wiped her eyes proudly. Clara Bell stood beside Alara, smiling through tears. Kalen wore a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. Alara wore a cream dress that moved softly in the wind. When the circuit minister spoke the final words, Kalen kissed her slowly and deeply, sealing more than a promise. He sealed a life. The ranch flourished in the years that followed. Cattle numbers doubled. New barns were built. Fences stretched farther into the plains. Alara sat beside Kalen in meetings, speaking clearly, confidently. Men who once would not have noticed her now listened carefully when she gave direction. She learned every detail of the ranch: trade routes, supply costs, land disputes. She was no longer being taught. She was leading. When she discovered she was with child, she found Kalen at the dinner table and told him simply. For a moment, he stared at her. Then he stood so quickly, his chair tipped backward. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're having a baby." The night their daughter, Isla Rose, was born, the wind howled outside the manor walls. Snow fell thick and heavy. Inside, the house was filled with warmth and light. When Kalen held the tiny child in his large hands, his expression softened in a way Alara had never seen before. "She's perfect," he whispered. Holding her daughter against her chest, Alara felt something settle inside her completely. She had once believed she had lost everything. Now she understood that loss had only cleared the path. Years passed like turning pages in a book. 2 more children followed. Declan, steady and thoughtful. Bronte, bright and curious. The manor rang with laughter and small footsteps. The sound of children racing through halls replaced the echo of loneliness that had once lived there. Alara taught her children to ride beneath the wide Montana sky. She showed them how to read by oil lamp light. She told them never to shrink themselves for anyone. Kalen taught them courage, honor, strength. Even in quiet moments, when the children were asleep and the ranch settled into silence, the fire between Alara and Kalen still burned strong. One evening, she found him in the barn, tending to a mare about to foal. Lantern light flickered across his face. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "I'm remembering," she replied. He turned slightly. "The Great Hall." She nodded. "I thought I was using you," she said honestly. "I thought it was revenge." "And now?" he asked. She stepped closer, placing her hands against his chest. "Now I know it was the bravest thing I ever did." He smiled faintly. "You were furious," he said. "I was desperate. You were magnificent." She laughed softly. "You told me once I might not be able to walk after you were done proving yourself," she teased. His eyes darkened slightly with familiar warmth. "I meant it," he murmured. She swatted his shoulder lightly, smiling. "We have 3 children. I think you've proven yourself enough." "Doesn't mean I'm finished," he said, pulling her gently closer. Their kiss was different now from that first one in the Great Hall. It was no longer sharp or reckless. It was deep, steady, certain, built from years of trust and choice. Later that night, Alara stood outside beneath the vast Montana sky. Stars scattered across it like silver dust. The wind moved softly through the tall grass. Inside the house, her children slept safe, warm. Kalen stepped beside her, his arms sliding around her waist. She leaned into him easily. "I used to think love was something promised," she said quietly. "Something spoken in pretty words." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know it's something chosen every day." He pressed a kiss to her hair. She had walked into the Ironwood Manor as a scullery maid, desperate for revenge. She had kissed a powerful man in the middle of a grand hall to wound someone who had broken her heart. But that reckless act had not destroyed her. It had rebuilt her. She was no longer invisible, no longer abandoned. She was wife, mother, partner. She was strong. The plains stretched endless before them. Just as it had the day, she scrubbed floors beneath crystal chandeliers. But she was not the same girl. Some bargains began in anger. Some kisses began in defiance. And sometimes, the boldest step a woman takes in her weakest moment becomes the very step that leads her home. Alara rested her head against Kalen's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. For the first time in her life, she understood fully. Love had not been her revenge. Love had been her reward.